They said the GP24 and GP25 were almost identical, carbon copies carved from the same genius. But behind Ducati's closed doors, Luigi Dall'Igna was fighting a battle no data sheet could confess. The man who engineered an empire now stood guarding its most fragile heart, Francesco Bagnaia's confidence. And while the world mocked the idea of identical bikes, Dall'Igna knew that a single rider's feeling could collapse an entire dynasty. He had seen telemetry say perfect as Pecco whispered something's wrong, a contradiction sharp enough to split a season open. It wasn't the bike he feared. It was the silence between rider and machine, the microscopic shift in balance that even sensors hesitate to reveal. Dall'Igna's voice trembled between truth and protection, hinting at a mystery Ducati refuses to name. Why defend a champion who suddenly doubts what made him invincible? Why hide behind identical engines when every lap exposes a difference no engineer dares to map? Something inside that garage is shifting, something deeper than performance, heavier than pressure, and more dangerous than any rival. And until the final race writes the truth in asphalt, we're left staring at a question that burns hotter than any victory. What is Ducati hiding to protect its king? Ducati entered the 2024 season as if carrying a burning sun in its hands, aware of its own brightness yet cautious of the shadows forming behind it while every breath in the paddock seemed to echo their ambition. Luigi Dall'Igna looked at the numbers with calm conviction and said, "We won everything we could win, 16 races out of 19, even while admitting that a strange streak of bad luck had begun to cling to them like stubborn dust that refused to be brushed away." Reporters framed the season as a triumph carved in steel, but inside the garage a soft tremor suggested that perfection was never as solid as it appeared when measured against human nerves. The little-known detail that the team revised only the thermal tolerance parameters of a specific gearbox bearing whispered how thin the line between dominance and fragility truly was, revealing a vulnerability hidden beneath layers of precision. Engines hummed like a choir holding its breath, waiting for the next verse that might change the melody entirely, and every vibration seemed to carry a coded message about the future. Pecco, alone in his motorhome one night, let a quiet thought slip through him. What if winning everything makes losing feel even heavier than anyone expects? Lingering in the air like an unanswered echo, the late-season stumbles felt like unexpected cracks in a marble statue, tiny but unsettling as if sculpted by invisible hands that understood doubt better than victory. Fans saw victory. Technicians saw risk collecting in the corners where data met uncertainty, forming silent warnings in clusters of numbers. The paddock murmured that Aprilia and KTM were creeping closer, sharpening their edges without showing their hands and moving with the stealth of rising tidewater that laps higher each night. Gigi tried to silence the noise, yet tension flickered in his eyes during debriefs like a candle fighting a draft. Each race weekend became a balancing act between reassurance and urgency, a tightrope stretched over months of expectation and the weight of a looming narrative shift. The team felt the pressure coil around them, with the elegance of a tightening ribbon that nonetheless threatened to snap under unseen strain. Trackside, the air vibrated with a mixture of triumphal energy and quiet foreboding that settled on shoulders like fine dust drifting slow. Mechanics worked with the precision of watchmakers, aware that even a millimeter could shift the narrative in ways impossible to predict. Rival garages watched Ducati with a hunger that bordered on reverence, studying every gesture for clues and every silence for meaning. The atmosphere thickened as journalists insisted that dominance could not last forever, crafting stories like sculptors working wet clay. Still, Ducati held the lead as if gripping the edge of a cliff with absolute determination and the faith of seasoned climbers who trust their fingertips more than the wind. Bagnaia sensed the fragility but refused to voice it, choosing silence as his shield and discipline as his anchor. Gigi walked through the paddock with the poise of someone who knew storms could rise without warning and reshape the landscape overnight. By the final races, the empire still shone, but its edges shimmered with uncertainty, like metal beginning to warm under an unrelenting sun that hinted at change. And in that tension, the season found its climax, ending on a sentence no one could ignore. Greatness is loud, but doubt whispers louder. Ducati approached the 2024 season with the precision of a chess master, refusing to move a single piece unless absolutely necessary, embracing stillness as strategy rather than hesitation. Luigi Dall'Igna revealed without theatrics that they began the year with practically no evolutions, choosing stability over innovation as if protecting a fragile equilibrium. He explained that the GP25 was essentially identical to the 2024 machine in engine, chassis, and aerodynamics, a decision that sounded simple yet carried immense weight. The little-known detail that only a micro-adjustment to the crankshaft vibration harmonics, had been approved showed how deliberately conservative the plan was. Rivals introduced sweeping upgrades while Ducati held its breath, trusting the strength of its existing architecture. Engineers whispered doubts in the corners of the garage, yet the strategy remained firm like a stone balanced on its narrowest edge. Pecco's inner voice murmured late at night, "If the bike never changes, will the world around it change faster than we can react?" Every test day became a study in restraint, a discipline of doing less rather than more. Gigi insisted that avoiding risk was the boldest form of courage in a landscape obsessed with novelty. The paddock reacted with disbelief, sensing that Ducati was daring fate by choosing constancy in a sport defined by evolution. Mechanics worked through the winter finding perfection in repetition, polishing components already polished 100 times. The bike felt familiar, almost eerily so, like rereading a book whose ending you know, but still fear. Journalists framed the strategy as a gamble wrapped in serenity. Aprilia and KTM pushed updates like rising waves trying to erode a cliff, but Ducati stood unmoved. The atmosphere around the team thickened as speculation grew that stability might become stagnation. Riders felt the tension quietly, sensing the invisible clock ticking around them. Gigi walked through the pit lane with a calm that masked deep calculation. He trusted the rider's talent to elevate a machine unchanged by time. Yet beneath that confidence lurked the awareness that even the strongest structure can weaken if left untouched too long. And so the season built itself toward its turning point, ending with a truth whispered through every garage wall. Sometimes the greatest risk is believing safety will last forever. In that quiet realization, Ducati understood that their meticulous stillness had created a fragile throne suspended above shifting ground, and as whispers of approaching rivals grew louder, the team felt time stretching and tightening around them like a long corridor of mirrors reflecting both triumph and vulnerability, urging them to confront the paradox of choosing stability in a world where every heartbeat demanded movement, innovation, and the courage to step beyond the comfort of past. Victories into the uncertain promise of tomorrow. The corridor seemed endless, filled with echoes of engines past and future intertwining in a tapestry of possibility, and every reflection showed a version of the team grappling with the delicate art of choosing when to hold firm and when to leap into the unknown, a reminder that greatness is never static but a living shape that bends, stretches, and shifts with every choice made in silence, and every question left unanswered beneath the glow of pit lane lights as the night slowly folded itself around their unspoken hopes and fears. Ducati entered mid-season wrapped in a contradiction that grew louder with every paddock whisper, a quiet storm built around machines that were supposedly the same yet behaved like distant cousins. Luigi Dall'Igna repeated with almost mathematical calm that the GP24 and the GP23 were essentially identical, his voice steady even as speculation swirled. He revealed that the engines used in winter tests were swapped freely between bikes, a detail that painted a picture of near-perfect mechanical uniformity. The lesser-known nuance was that only durability-oriented components, like a reinforced clutch basket, had been revised for safety rather than performance. Yet the results on track split like a fault line, with some riders rising and others collapsing under invisible weight. Márquez rode with hunger, Bagnaia fluctuated like a heartbeat under stress, and Antonio danced between brilliance and disappearance. Mechanics measured every tolerance twice, chasing ghosts no sensor could detect. Pecco's inner monologue asked quietly, how can the same bike feel like salvation one Sunday and a stranger the next? Engineers studied overlays where identical throttle traces told different stories, as if the machines were mirrors reflecting different fears. Gigi insisted again, the bikes are all extremely similar, trying to ground the team in logic when emotions tried to rewrite reality. Rivals looked on with curiosity, sensing that Ducati's greatest mystery wasn't technical but psychological. Every debrief became a fragile negotiation between data and feeling, precision and intuition. The uniformity of the bikes became a paradox that stretched across the garage like a taut string ready to sing or snap. Riders compared notes with an urgency that hinted at quiet desperation. The team hunted for cause in the smallest corners of telemetry, chasing clues as elusive as breath on cold glass. The GP25 prototypes waiting in the wings only added to the tension, promising evolution but revealing uncertainty. Technicians whispered that the smallest shift in weight distribution could behave differently depending on riding style, an insight both mundane and terrifying. Even so, Gigi walked the line with a posture of someone who trusted the machine more than the noise. By the final tests, riders rode identical motorcycles that felt increasingly like personalized reflections of their confidence. And as the paddock held its breath, The drama reached its climax in a single truth whispered through the garage walls. A perfect machine still bends under the imperfections of those who dare to ride it. Ducati entered the second half of the season with a new and unsettling quiet, a silence sharpened by the weight of expectations and the scrutiny of the paddock. Luigi Dall'Igna, who once explained every bolt and nuance with almost professorial transparency, now simply said, "It is right that what happens internally stays internal," closing a door that had been open for years. The shift felt abrupt, like a brilliant lighthouse suddenly dimming to preserve its own energy. Inside the garage, technicians moved with monk-like discipline, guarding data screens as though protecting sacred texts. A little-known adjustment to the internal load mapping of the rear suspension, classified as confidential, hinted at deeper changes behind the locked curtain. Riders sensed that something unspoken was being protected, wrapped in layers of strategic discretion. Pecco's inner monologue whispered, "If they stop explaining things, does that mean the answers are getting harder to face?" Gigi's silence became a new form of leadership, a shield against the rising waves of speculation. Journalists, denied the usual feast of details, crafted narratives from shadows and fragments. Rival teams watched with fascination, suspecting that Ducati's quiet meant more than simple caution. The environment grew tense, as though the team had shifted from broadcasters to guardians of a fragile treasure. Engineers spoke in coded phrases during debriefs, reducing once-long explanations to surgical, enigmatic sentences. The garage felt like a theater backstage, where invisible mechanisms drove the visible spectacle. Gigi's calm presence radiated authority, yet even he could not mask the gravity behind the decision to stop revealing technical truths. Every race weekend added a new layer to the mystery, deepening the sense that Ducati was hiding not weakness but vulnerability. Pecco and his crew navigated feedback sessions with a careful diplomacy that had not existed before. Mechanics aligned components with the precision of astronomers adjusting a telescope, seeking clarity in an atmosphere thick with uncertainty. Rumors multiplied around them, feeding on the absence of clear answers and spreading through the paddock like cracks on a frozen lake. Gigi walked the pit lane with serene determination, as if the silence itself were a tool sharpened for survival. And at the peak of this tension, the story reached its climax, leaving a line etched in the minds of all who watched. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Bagnaia's season unfolded like a trembling compass that kept finding north one Sunday, only to spin wildly the next, leaving the paddock breathless and searching for patterns hidden between the data points. Luigi Dall'Igna spoke with disarming honesty when he admitted, "If I could give an answer, I'd be happy," revealing the depth of a mystery that resisted every tool and every theory. The uncertainty grew heavier each weekend, settling around the garage like an invisible fog that only the rider could see through. Engineers examined telemetry overlays that appeared perfect, yet something essential kept slipping away in motion. A small, little-known adjustment to the swing arm stiffness, introduced mid-season for stability, became a symbol of how tiny changes could unlock greatness or expose weakness. Pecco's inner voice whispered at night, "Why can't my hands feel what the numbers insist is there?" His confusion created a tension that pulsed through the team with the uneasy rhythm of an unresolved chord. On track, he was sometimes an unstoppable force, carving lines sharp enough to make the asphalt feel alive. Other weekends, he struggled like a pianist whose fingers hesitate on familiar keys. Gigi stood beside him in debriefs with calm patience, seeking truth in the spaces between words rather than in the sentences themselves. The team felt like they were chasing a ghost, a sensation that evaporated the harder they tried to define it. Mechanics tightened bolts with deliberate care, aware that confidence itself was a mechanical component. Rivals watched with a mix of curiosity and concern, sensing that Bagnaia's battle was internal rather than technical. The atmosphere around the Ducati box became a fragile shell, as if any loud noise might crack the delicate balance holding the champion together. Every improvement seemed like a fragile thread pulled from a tapestry woven in instinct. Gigi reminded everyone that data could not measure fear, hope, or trust, only movement. As the season stretched on, Pecco rode as if searching for an echo of himself hidden somewhere inside the bike. His victories glowed bright, his struggles cut deep, and each race felt like turning a page in a book whose ending had not yet decided whether to comfort or devastate. The tension reached its peak when even the perfect laps felt imperfect to him, signaling that the problem lived deeper than mechanics could reach. And in that fragile climax, the truth crashed softly across the season. Sometimes the hardest battle a champion faces is the one fought against his own fading certainty. Rumors moved through the paddock like restless birds, circling above Ducati with an agitation that no one wanted to acknowledge aloud. It began with a whisper from an ex-champion, then multiplied into a storm suggesting that Bagnaia and Di Giannantonio might trade places, a notion both absurd and strangely magnetic. Luigi Dall'Igna answered the speculation with rare firmness, saying, "I can absolutely deny that possibility," yet the denial only fueled the intrigue. Behind the garage doors, the air felt denser, as if every unspoken concern added another invisible layer to the atmosphere. A little-known contractual clause guaranteeing Bagnaia technical priority in debrief sequencing became the center of theoretical debates among insiders. The media painted the scenario like a puzzle with missing pieces, forcing everyone to imagine the worst outcomes. Pecco's inner thought lingered quietly. Why does a rumor feel heavier than a mistake on track? Engineers kept working with detached concentration, but even their silence vibrated with unasked questions. Dall'Igna carried the weight of being unknowingly cast as the protagonist of a story he never auditioned for. The riders' performances became scrutinized for signs of dissatisfaction that weren't there. Gigi walked through the chaos with the calm of someone steering a boat across a lake that only appeared still on the surface. He reminded his team that clarity lived in facts, not gossip, yet the noise around them grew louder. Each session on track felt like an examination of loyalty rather than a test of speed. Ducati's immaculate red garage, once a sanctuary, became a stage where every gesture seemed loaded with narrative meaning. The metaphorical shadow of the rumor stretched long, bending light around even the simplest decisions. Journalists kept asking the same question with different words, trying to crack a story that had no truth to break open. Riders from other teams watched with fascination, sensing instability where there was only annoyance. The technical staff responded by doubling down on precision, tightening their discipline as if accuracy could silence chaos. Yet Gigi understood that perception was a force no instrument could measure. And when the weekend reached its tense climax, the storyline collapsed under its own emptiness, leaving a single undeniable truth hanging in the air like a final lap completed with perfect clarity. Sometimes the loudest stories are the ones built entirely from silence and fear. Marc's injury arrived like an unexpected eclipse over Ducati's carefully plotted season, dimming every plan that had been drawn with precision and hope. Luigi Dall'Igna explained quietly that the goal is for Marc to return at 100%, yet even the gentleness of those words carried the heavy echo of lost opportunity. The team had intended to use the final races as a living laboratory, a moving platform for the GP25's early evolution. A little-known detail revealed that these sessions included testing a new anti-squat algorithm integrated into the ECU, a feature tailored specifically around Marc's aggressive style. Without him, that entire development branch froze in place like a river suddenly caught by winter. Mechanics walked past his empty chair with the reverence of people passing a monument. Each unused set of data sheets seemed to whisper what might have been. Marc's inner monologue during recovery asked, "Will the bike move on without me? Or will I return to a world already changed?" His absence carved a void that altered the emotional geometry of the garage. Other riders felt the shift, sensing how one missing reference point transformed the feedback ecosystem. Gigi tried to maintain balance, but even his calm steps sounded different in the hollowed silence of box. Rival teams noticed Ducati's vulnerability and watched with the curiosity of observers witnessing a giant adjust to its own shadow. The technicians, deprived of their most aggressive benchmark, were forced to recalculate their timelines with painful precision. Every postponed test felt like a door closing softly but firmly. The paddock's chatter turned the setback into a symbol of unpredictability at the highest level of racing. Marc's unexpected end to the season left the team clutching blueprints that suddenly felt incomplete. Engineers studied data from earlier races, trying to simulate the missing information with mathematical approximations. The garage smelled of oil, metal, and a faint unease that no one dared to name. Gigi carried the weight of the interruption with the poise of a man who understood that progress sometimes limps instead of sprints. And when Valencia arrived without Marc on the bike, the season reached its emotional peak, delivering a truth as sharp as asphalt under floodlights. Even the strongest project shakes when the man meant to drive it forward is forced to watch from the outside. The superbike paddock rarely agrees on anything. Yet in the closing stretch of 2024 something extraordinary happened, something that rippled across Ducati with a resonance no wind tunnel could measure. Alvaro Bautista's ballast rule, long viewed as a burden crafted just for him, became the spark that united riders who normally fought each other like planets locked in perpetual orbit. Luigi Dall'Igna spoke with calm admiration when he said, It's a beautiful gesture, acknowledging the rare moment when competitors placed fairness above rivalry. The petition carried a gravity that surprised even insiders, revealing how deeply the rule had been resented. A little-known detail that the ballast altered the bike's mass distribution enough to change tire temperature profiles mid-corner, added technical credibility to the protest. Mechanics whispered that even small shifts in weight could distort feedback the way a misplaced word distorts a fragile conversation. As signatures accumulated, the paddock air thickened with a sense of purpose. Bautista's inner thought trembled softly. Why did it take this long for others to see what I've been carrying alone? The riders' unity felt like a rare constellation forming in the night sky, a pattern visible only for an instant but powerful enough to change trajectories. Journalists captured the moment with the reverence of archivists documenting a turning point. The petition became a mirror in which the sport confronted its own contradictions. Ducati watched from within its red walls, seeing both support and controversy intertwine like intertwined threads in a heavy rope. Gigi understood the political delicacy behind every signature, every gesture of solidarity. Other manufacturers reacted with guarded silence, measuring whether the shift threatened their influence. Engineers revisited their simulations, wondering how the potential removal of ballast might rewrite the competitive landscape. The tension hummed like a cable pulled taut between tradition and transformation. Even among fans, the story carried emotional weight, revealing the human cost hidden behind regulations. The atmosphere trembled with anticipation as everyone waited for the ruling that could restore balance or deepen the fracture. And in the final hours, when voices converged and uncertainty hovered like dust caught in a beam of light, the entire saga reached its climax, settling into one unforgettable truth. Sometimes the greatest victories are forged not on track, but in the courage of those who dare to stand together.